Hey everybody, welcome to the Legacy Podcast. My name's Bill Dupenthaler.
And I'm Mike Conan, and this is a podcast for disciples who want to make disciples. Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm Mike Conan. I'm with Bill Dupenthaler, and we are really excited about this series that we've been doing on what would Jesus do. I was telling somebody, I was at a wedding this last week, and telling somebody we were doing this series, and he actually stroked his wrist.
He had a bracelet?
He did not have it, but he remembered it so fondly because he worked for so long. Like he knew exactly where it used to be, and he was telling me about how he wore it so much that. And another guy was telling me at the fundraiser we held, a doctor was there, and he was saying he puts it on his stethoscope. He still has it on there.
Really?
His WWJD bracelet is on his stethoscope, and so it opens up some conversations, especially now when people are like, I don't know what WWJD stands for anymore. And it's been a really interesting series as we've looked and plan to look into for the next few weeks.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things in life that we struggle with. Some of the things in life that we're not sure, what would Jesus say about this stuff? What would Jesus do with it? We started with social media, which is probably that, could have done a 4-week series on that one alone.
Yeah.
And then, last week we talked about would Jesus go to church? And we kind of came to the conclusion that, Jesus would go to church. And we did come to the conclusion that we both of us thought Jesus would do social media. But both in the case of church and in the case of social media, it would not look the same as how we may go to church. And I think that's going to be the same thing that we look at for the subject today.
Yeah.
And the subject today is a tough one, I think, because it's a lost art. In fact, I've been attending different churches now for 2.5 years as part of what we do with Legacy, and I've never heard somebody preach on the subject we're going to talk about tonight or today. And in fact, when I was preaching, I preached on this subject. I preached probably, 500, 1,000 sermons. I can't even tell you how many, 15, 20 years worth. And I preached on this subject maybe 4 times. And so it's not a popular subject at all, and we haven't covered it in any of our podcast materials. I did it a little bit in my podcast, but so the area we're talking about is kind of new territory, and it's the Sabbath. And would Jesus keep the Sabbath today in 2022? And even maybe the more important question is, would he want us to keep the Sabbath in 2022? And so we were trying to figure out a way to tackle this one because
that's not exactly like a really gripping topic, Now that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's the Sabbath.
Right? Well, part of the challenge is people are so ignorant, they don't even know what the Sabbath means anymore, other than they associate it with Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, well, is this worthwhile? Do we even talk about it? And we both came to the conclusion, this is something that was a pretty central part of things. And so we're going to try to start by having a little fun with it, in the sense of what is the Sabbath? Wrong answers only.
And that's kind of a social media deal that people pose questions and then they say, well, wrong answers only.
Yeah, wrong answers only. So we're going to start off with what is the Sabbath? Wrong answers only. And Bill, I'll let you pick whatever you think you might think of as the first answer.
Well, so in other words, foods that I love to eat. Lima beans.
Yeah, right.
Be an example of wrong answers only.
Yes, that's good, Bill.
I'm just
what a wrong answer is.
Just helping out, setting the table. So, what is the Sabbath? Wrong answers only. Well, the first one that came to my mind was, the Sabbath is it's the day you have to go to church.
Right.
Yeah. So that's like it's it's biblical. I mean, come on. You got to go to church 1 day a week. That's the deal. That's the Sabbath. You check that box. You've gone to church and you've done the Sabbath.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate statement. If you were to say to somebody, "Well, when is the Sabbath?" That's the day we go to church. And then if you're in a real spiritual home, maybe it's the day you go to church and then go to lunch afterwards with a family friend or something.
Right?
that you're the super spiritual people.
Right. So you might be surprised that we are including that as on the wrong answers list, because, well, shoot, I thought we just got done in the last podcast talking about how important it was for us to go to church and for us to be a part of a church. Yes, that's all true, but that's not really what the Sabbath is.
Right, and that's a very limited view.
Right, it includes it, but that's not what it is. It's a limited view of it.
Yeah, and another thought is the Sabbath is a day where you don't do anything. A Sabbath is a day where you get to do all of your stuff on 6 days, and on the seventh day, you just have to sit there and do nothing. And you can drive to church if you can't walk to one, but then when you come home, you need to have your food prepared because you don't do anything, and you just sit around and enjoy nothingness.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Mike a couple of years ago. Jody, my wife, and I, we had a chance to go to Israel, and man, I was, I knew that the Jewish people, it's very strict with the laws and keeping the Sabbath and all that kind of thing, but I was blown away. We stayed at a hotel, and we happened to be there at this hotel on the Sabbath day, and we noticed that all of the Jewish people that were there at the hotel were getting on and off of a different elevator because we were just taking the regular elevator, and it's a regular elevator. Well, there was another elevator just next to it that it had some kind of a sensor, I guess, but you'd walk up to it and the doors, maybe it just when it arrives at the floor, I think it just automatically opens and just stays open until somebody gets on. But anyways, so you get on this other elevator, and there are no buttons on the elevator. You just walk onto it and you stand there. Then eventually the door closes, and then it just stops at every floor on the way up, and then on the way back down, just stops at every floor. It's very slow, but you don't have to work. And so for them to keep the Sabbath literally meant no work. You don't do anything. So just pressing a button was considered, breaking the Sabbath. So nth degree, no work. I don't think anybody would say that, but it's that whole idea of just like, you can't do anything.
And and again, we're painting this extreme case of what it is not, so you can get the idea, because when we started this whole thing, we realized that people have a negative view of Sabbath.
Yeah.
And we wanted to just kind of dig into some of those myths and some of those things. And another one is it's a day I have to give up. I get 6 days, and then God gets that seventh day. And so I don't, it starts off as the whole idea being, man, I got to give this up. It's God's day. Oh, shoot. I don't get to, just the whole sound of it sounds like drudgery.
Yeah. The Sabbath, that really kind of sucks. And I think it's keeping the Sabbath is a good one for rule followers.
Yes.
It's something that you check the box. Okay, I've done my duty. I've kept the Sabbath. So we didn't have any fun. We didn't do anything. We just kind of like stayed at home and just check the box.
Right, and now God is pleased with me because I have checked the box.
Right.
Because God has set this whole thing up as a big test to see if I will check the right box. And if I can check the right box, then God will love me. And you know what? I am better than others, which is how that always ends up being. If you've ever talked to anybody, and I have friends who are Seventh-day Adventists, but extreme Seventh-day Adventist people, you ever talk to any of them about the Sabbath, and boy, it becomes legalistic really quick. A box-checking exercise to show who's better and who pleases God more. And it can really slide really quickly into gross legalism where we start checking off boxes to think this is what we do.
Well, it is one of the 10 commandments, so you're commanded to do this.
Yeah.
Don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't murder, and make sure you keep the Sabbath. It's almost it's kind of this wagging finger, negative kind of a connotation.
Right. It's a don't do. Instead of it actually, it's not a don't do. It's a keep.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting.
Right.
But if we were to summarize all of these views, it would be people tend to think of Sabbath in a negative light. and they think of it as, man, I get to enjoy 6 days of what I want to do, and on the seventh day it is not so great. And another way to look at it is it's kind of a day of drudgery, like, oh man, I don't get to enjoy this, I don't get to do that. And again, we're kind of hitting an extreme here. But Jesus said these words. He said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, God didn't create the Sabbath day and say, oh man, now I'm going to make everybody, because I love the Sabbath so much, I'm going to make everybody participate in the Sabbath. And it was quite the opposite according to Jesus. According to Jesus, It was the other way around, where he had made man, he made woman, he made all of these things in creation. And part of the plan for creation was for them to have this day where it would be different.
Well, as a matter of fact, you begin to discover as you look into the scriptures that not only the Sabbath, but any of the commandments and any of the laws, and any of the things that Jesus told people to do, it was for our benefit, and it was for our joy, and for having a better life, a life that's more fulfilled and productive, and all kinds of things, that all these things came about. It was not the opposite. It was not this power hungry God that just loved to tell us not to do stuff and give us things to do, and that kind of thing.
Well, God didn't create a day for boredom. He didn't create a day for just folly or whatever.
Yeah.
But another thing that people do say, and this would fall into the wrong answer only category for us, would be, well, the Sabbath is something that people did before Jesus. Once Jesus,
it's an Old Testament deal.
Yeah, we have our rest, and new Christians don't have to do that anymore because that's a law. And again, the whole idea being that it's this drudgery, this thing that God put in place to test people, to show how good they were. Another way to look at it, and people look at it through this way, is people couldn't find rest before Christ, but now that Christ has come, He is our rest.
He's our rest, and so we have rest all the time because we have peace and joy and love in Jesus, and so we don't need to worry about the Old Testament Sabbath kind of thing anymore.
Yeah, and there is some truth to that, which both of us believe too. There is a sense where Holy Spirit is in us now in a way the Holy Spirit was not present in Old Testament believers all the time, and in every believer.
Right.
Where we do find rest, we do find peace, and we don't mean to dismiss that at all. But both of us believe in, a daily delay where you spend time with the Lord, and a weekly withdrawal, which we would call Sabbath keeping, and then a regular retreat where you're having a mountaintop experience, and you're getting away. And that's the pattern that we see Christ do when He was with His disciples. Was this daily delay, a weekly withdrawal, and then a regular retreat.
Yeah. So we posed the question in this whole series. Well, what would Jesus do? And if you remember, if you heard the podcast, our intro to this whole topic, we answered the question, what would Jesus do, with a few principles.
Yeah.
And one of those principles was, well, you go to the scriptures. What does the Bible say about this topic? And so let's do that for a second here. On this whole topic of the Sabbath. What's the Bible say about it?
Well, it's really interesting because it actually comes out in the first story. In Genesis chapter 2, it's the ending of Genesis chapter 1. We see that God has created in Genesis 1 each of the days, and in each of the days He says, this is good, this is good. And then He makes humans and animals and all this stuff. He says, oh, this is real good. Mm-hmm. And then we have this interesting moment at the end of the story where God pauses. And it says that, and on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that He had done.
So God was exhausted.
Exactly.
So tired out that He just fell on the couch and just slept all through that seventh day.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, He had depleted Himself because when He had
He did a lot of creating.
He had spoken the words and everything happened around Him. Speaking those words was exhausting for Him, I'm sure. C.S. Lewis described it as Him singing creation. So maybe it was singing that was really, put Him under for the...
Either that or maybe it was something else.
Neither of us think that God was worn out from creation. No. Neither of us think that God said, oh my gosh, I did not realize how much work this was going to be.
I need a day of rest.
Oh boy, am I overwhelmed. Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to get back at it. No, that's not the way. It's much more the case where God took a day to delight.
Yeah.
God took a day, when it says rest, it doesn't mean that He was exhausted. It means that He's looking back and at all that He has done, and he is delighting. He's saying, this is good. This is very good. And that's what we see as the pattern for Sabbath in the Bible, is this day of delight. This day of being thankful, this day of being filled with awe, this day of looking and appreciating all that is around us and all that God has done. God did it, and he patterns for us to do it. And again, you did mention this, Bill, so it's worth mentioning. It is one of the big 10 commandments.
Right.
It's the fourth commandment, and it is, like I said, it's the hinge commandment. The first three commandments deal with God and how we would worship God, how we would honor God in our relationship with God. And then the last six deal with our relationship with other people and how we interact with other people, how we love other people, how we don't steal, how we honor them, all those pieces to the puzzle. And the Sabbath is that unique one in the middle where it's kind of both God and man together. And none of us would dismiss any of the other the commandments, but for some reason, as we said before, others look at this and see passages in the New Testament and think, well, maybe that one we don't really have to worry about. My argument for that would be, number one, I think it's the misconception of what Sabbath is and what Sabbath is intended to be, but also it's not looking back far enough. People look to Exodus and say, well, that's where Sabbath began. That's where this idea of keeping a Sabbath began, which is actually true. I don't mean to say.
It's there too.
It is there too, but that is the place where it's recorded as a command. For the first time, it's in Moses. But from the beginning, we see this is part of how God purposed it and planned it and demonstrated it for us. So before the fall came, before we needed Jesus, Sabbath was a part of God's plan. And so, and Sabbath is also this, the way it's designed, this tiny taste of what heaven will be like, I think. It's funny, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the idea being that it is a day that is a day of delight. I think that would be the best way I would describe it. Another way to look at it, though, it's also a day of restoration. And it's a day where we take a break from our regular routine and we come back to the things that are most important. It's a day of awe, it's a day of gratitude, and it's a day of delight. You know?
Yeah, that whole idea of a day of delight is pretty cool. And like the more we talk about this, and I think as we go on for the next few minutes, this whole Sabbath thing starts sounding better and better. It's like, oh, so maybe this is not something that I have to do, but it's like, this is like something that I get to do.
It's a gift.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're on a diet and you're depriving yourself and then you get your cheat day. So Sabbath is almost like God's divine cheat day for us.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because if you've ever kept Lent before, or you've ever deprived yourself, one of the rules of Lent is that on Sunday, the Sabbath, you get to have what you have. So I always do some sort of thing for Lent, and I know you don't necessarily practice that, but so I'll give up sweets, I'll give up social media, I'll give up whatever, but on that Sunday, I can partake if I choose and come back to it. And because the people who were the Puritans and those who started these habits believe that we should never deprive ourselves on the Sabbath, because it's a day for joy. And we should never put ourselves in a spot where we are lamenting or in pain and anguish. Instead, it should be a place of delight.
Yeah.
So let's dig into a little bit of what we are to delight in, because that's kind of what the bottom line. Let's just put forth the idea that God's first Sabbath was a day of delight and a day of enjoying all that he had done. So the first thing that we think of that we are called to delight in is God himself, right?
Right. And that's, of course, where going to church is certainly a part of the Sabbath, and getting an opportunity to worship the Lord and to be in communion with other people and other believers, and to be encouraged in our faith, and to learn and to grow and all those kind of things. And so that's a big part of it.
Yeah, well, and one of the people who impacted me the most is Dan Allender. He has a book, for those of you that are watching here, I'm holding it up now, it's called Sabbath. And this book really changed my view of a lot of these things. And he has a way of doing that in general. But he talks about Sabbath being a day of sensual glory. You know, where we worship in response to God's goodness and beauty. And we do so with awe and gratitude. So when we think of, our worship experience, it should be filled with awe and gratitude. It should be filled with expressions of God's goodness. It should be filled with expressions of God's beauty, in the sense that we look and see the greatness of our God, and he is displayed in front of us, and that we respond with awe and gratitude.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason for the full day Sabbath that is really freeing, and I found myself when I'm doing this found it really freeing, is when I think of the Sabbath as just that 1 hour worship service instead of the whole day. What are you doing after 45 minutes in the worship service?
You're looking at your watch and got to get back into the day.
You're thinking about what you're going to do next.
Right.
You know, and I think that part of the reason for the beauty of taking the whole Sabbath is you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about what I need to go, what I need to do, and maybe you've got plans, but they're later on, and you put it in as part of your plans. I'm going to enjoy being with God and the presence of God, because this is a gift.
Yeah.
It's not a chore or duty, it's a gift.
Yeah. Well, I know for Jody and me, we try to spend time with the Lord every morning throughout the week, and read the Bible, and we pray together and things like that. But I love Sunday mornings because other than church, we don't have any other, like, for example, this morning we had our time with the Lord, but I needed to end it in time to get here to record the podcast.
Yeah.
And but on Sundays we don't have that same kind of time limitation, so we can spend more time and just enjoy reading the Bible and praying and talking, and it's cool. It's relaxing.
Well, and that leads us right into the next thing that I think God calls us to enjoy, is to enjoy others. And you nailed it there, where you're enjoying your spouse in a way that you're not during the rest of the week.
Yeah.
You're taking a pause from all the busyness and enjoying those around you. And the way that we see this expressed in the commandment is, the commandment doesn't say just for the owners of the plantation or the farm or whatever to take a break. It's everybody. Everybody stops. Everybody has this break on the Sabbath. And it is a time of unity, in the sense that we're all in this together. And Allender, in his book, talks about this being one of the chief things that he thinks is a central part of being in Sabbath mode, is this idea of feasting. And that the Old Testament God is a God of feasting and a God of delighting in relationships. And there's a sense where we're really honoring the Sabbath in a sweet spot when we're delighting in the Lord, but we're also delighting in others. We're hearing their stories, their pains, their struggles, but also their joys. And we're enjoying, and he calls it play. And he thinks that Sabbath is a day for play, where we are with others and actively enjoying creation and actively enjoying each other. And I just thought, wow, what a great idea, because most of us don't do that on our regular routine.
Yeah. And it kind of segueing from what you just said, talking about creation. I think that's another thing that for us, and I know, tons of people, but in the Northwest in general, where we live, people love the outdoors.
Yeah.
And they love God's creation, and sometimes that ends up being in conflict with the idea of going to church on Sundays.
Right.
Because when the sun comes out, people in the Northwest, they're going to be out in creation.
Yes.
Or they're going to be skiing in the snow or whatever. But still, that whole idea of enjoying God's creation is what an amazing, again, cheat day. It's like, you don't have to work on this day. It's not only is it okay to not work, it's like, no, don't work. Enjoy my creation. Enjoy my presence. Enjoy your family. Enjoy my people. And man, it's like, okay, I want a Sabbath. This sounds really, really good. Can we do this every week?
Seems like a good idea.
Seems like a good idea, Wow.
Well, and there's fun arguments in church circles too about, do we rest from our work or do we work from our rest? In other words, do we enjoy such a Sabbath that when we go back into our regular routine, we are reconnected with God, reconnected with others, reconnected and recentered in what's important in the world? Because I think that's what happens to us too often, and God knows we need this, is we can get in this circle and we just start spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and then we end up in a place where, gosh, I never intended to be here. How did I forget all these things that are the most important things? And the Sabbath is that wonderful gift that God gives us as people to say, no, guys, the Sabbath is intended to get you off that wheel and moving towards the important things. Even amidst when you have to do work and when you have to do other things, and work is a joy too. I don't mean to say it isn't. But when we do it for the right purposes, it's awesome and it's great. But we need that Sabbath rest, and especially work can take a toll on our relationships too. And this idea is, I think, really helpful for that.
Well, people ask me from time to time, like, how have you lasted so long in vocational ministry? And I worked for Young Life for 35 years, and now for the last 3 years with Legacy. And one of the things I can honestly say, I mean, I've done a lot of things wrong, and I've got a lot of areas where I need to get a lot better. But one of the things I've done okay at is actually being able to let go of work on the Sabbath, and even in the evening, even just to not keep working and keep working and keep working. But because especially, well, maybe it's true in all vocations, I guess, but certainly I know in ministry, vocational ministry, it literally never ends, because there's always somebody else to talk to, somebody else to deal with. There's some other issue that needs to be dealt with. You can make one more call, one more message, and it just sort of seems like it never ends. But I've been able to let go of it. So I was telling you, Mike, earlier, on Sundays, I rarely will go into my office. I have a home office. I rarely go into the office and open the computer. And just
me either.
Just let go of it, and it'll still be there on Monday.
Well, I think these are all good. And I want to just finish this little thought of what is the Sabbath with this one other thought that Elder has that I love, which is, he says the Sabbath is not only to enjoy the nature of creation, but also the awesome food that God has given to us. And drink.
Okay, I'm all in now. I'm all in.
And the idea being that, man, if you can enjoy, and when you live in France, I know that they do this better than we do, where you can enjoy a meal with friends for an extended period of time, where it is all about relationship. And in the West, I think we've really lost sight with this idea. There was an interesting article that came out years ago where it says we've shifted from a dining table culture where we'd have people over and have these feasts and delight in people to a garage culture, where we close our garage and we wall off everybody around us. And the Sabbath is a day to invite us to delight in God, to delight in others, but also to delight in all that He has created, including these great foods around us. And the last freebie I'll give, and this is one of the things that Elder said that really stuck with me, is Americans have an obesity problem, not because they enjoy food too much, but because they enjoy food too little. In other words, we have lost the art of the feast. We have lost the art of actually savoring each bite. Instead, we sit in front of the TV, or we quickly eat on the run in our car, or we just slam whatever down. Rather than enjoying each sip and each bite and each morsel, we tend to just be rushed all the time. And what if we had one day where we had time to take time and enjoy everything?
Wow. So, to wrap up this episode then, we would submit to you, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus practice the Sabbath, and would Jesus expect us to practice the Sabbath in 2022? Absolutely. But I wouldn't put it that way, that He would expect us to. He's given us a gift of this cheat day in life every 7 days.
Yeah.
What an amazing thing.
I couldn't agree more. And I think Jesus would keep the Sabbath, but He would not keep it as a Pharisee would. He would not keep it as a person who's trying to show how great they are would. He wouldn't keep it as a legalistic checkbox thing. Jesus would genuinely delight in God, delight in people, and delight in nature. And it would be inspiring to everyone around.
Yeah, so for us who are disciples, who want to make disciples, man, let's encourage each other, and let's ask each other, hey, and have this discussion about the Sabbath. Hey, are you keeping the Sabbath? And how are you using your Sundays? And let's talk to your family about it. Talk to your spouse about it. And let's begin practicing that, because as you do that, you are going to become a healthier person. You're going to become a more spiritual person. You're going to become more effective for the Lord. I mean, there's just no downside to it.
Well, there really isn't. And you notice we picked this podcast to do during non-football season too. So we're not going to get into that subject, but that's a tough one right there.
What would Jesus do? Would Jesus watch football on Sundays? Or more specifically, would he watch the 10 a.m. game?
Or specifically, would he watch 3 games on Sunday? You know, like that's the,
And would he be a Seahawks fan?
yeah.
Another day, another podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, we are so grateful that you listen to and watch our podcasts, and so many of you support Legacy financially. If you are not supporting yet or have not had a chance to get involved in any way, please go to our website, www.ourtruelegacy.com, and you'll find everything you need there to get involved, to get our prayer updates, and certainly to support us. And with the podcast, we're so grateful that you're a part of it, but we would love it if you would share this, subscribe, and like it, and help us get the word out on this, because we really feel like the things that we're talking about are important and worth sharing. So let's continue to be disciples who make disciples.
Amen.
Amen.